Art, especially in the times we're living in, is a difficult conversation to have with the average person. On one hand, art can be a beautiful expression of human ingenuity derived from one's personal experiences, but on the other hand, that art can be defined by an experience so unsightly that it squanders any inspiration or dialogue that it may have spurred. The latter was the overwhelming feeling I had walking away from this YouTube video. My friend had told me that the guy who made it, thesmalldude, went over some seldom discussed but very surprising talking points about the development and marketing of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 remake. Being a fan of both extreme sports video games from the 2000s and video essays, I eventually checked it out.
Levels have been removed, content has been removed, characters have been removed, 47 songs from the soundtrack have been removed. Iconic skaters were very noticeably missing from the game. The open world of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 is now restricted by a 2-minute timer. You can't actually see the skateboard because this text is too large. Taco Bell is everywhere. They replaced a big beautiful cake with a big Red Bull.
Right away, perfectly good criticisms to make about the remake. All too commonly, remakes of old games find reasons to remove content, if any reason at all, so off to a solid start.
They turned an attractive woman into a double amputee!
Okay, well that may be a somewhat true and kind of strange observation to make, but there's definitely some potential there for ableist implications. Moving on.
This may be a skateboarding game, but it had a significant role in creating a new male identity.
If you were a teenage boy in the 90s, then yes, this would be true. But if you're given a history lesson, no, that is absolutely not true. Punk rock has existed for almost as long as rock itself has existed, and emo would follow shortly thereafter. Additionally, your timeline is wrong. Rodney Mullen performed the first kickflip in the early 80s, long predating any direct correlation there might have been between the dawn of skating culture and the development of the Tony Hawk games. Not to mention the phrase new male identity just has a nasty sound to it. So maybe use something else to describe people who imitate Bam Margera.
There was no skateboarding games, and then there was.
Skate or Die, California Games, Town and Country for NES, Top Skater, Street Skater, and just that following year, Jet Set Radio. Either you're not that much of a gamer, or you think that skating culture was born the day this game released.
But remaking a game at all is an inherently flawed and disingenuous concept. Just because we have the technology now does not make the original work limited. The existence of Photoshop does not make oil paintings obsolete.
Lots to unpack here. Firstly, I do agree in some part that remakes are not necessary. Most games, released around the turn of the century, have aged fairly well when compared to their earlier counterparts. Creative integrity, in some regards, begins to fray when new artists alter or replace the work of the original artists, and gaming companies do often treat the new games as replacements for the old ones. However, I have to disagree as well. Many movies have also aged fairly well, ones even older than video games themselves, I would argue, yet they still receive remakes. Good ideas should not remain exclusive to a single group of people, as monopolizing them has only ended badly for the consumers, the artists, or both, and gamers that are truly interested in seeking out the originals should vote with their wallets. It's easy to say what companies should or shouldn't make, but they'll only make what there's demand for. And if you're still dissatisfied, then don't engage with the company at all.
Watch the sparks!
Very interesting choice to use the poster child for schizophrenic psycho killers as your avatar for sensible taste in audio design. Furthermore, would you like the games to be more or less similar to one another? I'm starting to get confused.
84%
of the original soundtrack is gone too. The licensing was just too expensive. It couldn't be done.
47 songs are missing from the game.
Again, do you want the games to be one and the same, or not? If they had the same soundtrack, the same audio, the same visuals, wouldn't that just be a re-release? Is that what you would prefer over a remake? And why specifically point out 100 gecs? I know hyperpop is a bit of a far cry from punk rock, nu metal, and hip hop, but the little annotation about one of the members being trans just seems like an unnecessary inclusion.
So Tony Hawk wants kids to discover Destroy Boys. What is that? Is that a band? It is a band.
You don't have to like this band specifically, but you can't argue that most people would likely discover them through this game, which is what Tony claims he wanted to do in the first place. 1 million monthly listeners is not a lot, and there's a good chance most of them are because of the new soundtrack. And hey, this is that punk rock you were talking about. You didn't say what kind of punk rock, so you can't complain.
Fontaine DC, Idols, an old one, X-Ray Specs.
X-Ray Specs. You probably haven't heard of X-Ray Specs. You might be under the impression that this is an up-and-coming punk band who deserves a shot in the spotlight. No, it's a black feminist from the 1970s.
Okay, whoa. Firstly, this is not a black feminist singer like you claim X-Ray Specs to be. They were a punk band that just so happens to have a black woman as their frontman. Secondly, same deal as before, this is still punk. May not be punk you know or care about, but if you're so concerned about the vision of the game not being punk rock enough, I imagine the inclusion of another punk rock band over someone like Sabrina Carpenter would put a smile on your face. Thirdly, Johnny Cash was featured on the Underground 2 soundtrack despite not being a punk artist, and Ring of Fire is even older than X-Ray Specs themselves. So what, do you take issue with the old games soundtracks too then? Is he too old and corporate for you? Fourthly, what is the criticism here? That they're not up and coming? In the interview of Tony Hawk that you included in your own video, he calls X-Ray Specs an old one.
An old one, X-Ray Specs.
It wasn't implying that every band is hot and new, but simply that the players listening to them may be hearing them for the first time. And lastly, you're mentioning the race of the lead singer because... why exactly?
Can you comment on New Game Plus or Game Plus mode, whatever it is called?
What's that?
Is it like a new set of goals after you complete the first set of goals?
It's an interesting idea.
Is it?
Yeah.
Combo letters?
That also an interesting idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting observation because not only does the game director indeed seem absolutely clueless about the game he's working on, but he's also clueless about features that actually are in the game. When you beat the game, you do in fact unlock new challenges to complete, one of which is collecting the combo letters. I'm a bit disappointed that SmallDude doesn't elaborate on this because it makes me wonder what involvement this game's director actually had. On that note, SmallDude does go into further detail about the corporatization of Pro Skater 3+4, so let's shine a light on that next.
Activision removed swastikas from a video game about World War II, but they incorporated a deeply polarizing and contentious government directive in a skateboarding game. These sick fucks want to brainwash you so badly. This has nothing to do with the Tony Hawk's video game series. This has nothing to do with skateboarding, or punk rock, or teenage angst. This is literal propaganda.
I find it fascinating that SmallDude has little to no ethical concerns regarding the usage of AI despite claiming to be anti-corporation. We'll see more of what I'm talking about later, but a very weird contradiction to have. It's doubly fascinating that, and I don't think this is a very controversial take, masks are typically only considered propaganda for those who are against wearing them. He, and by he I mean SmallDude prompts an AI chatbot to string together sounds using Peter Griffin's voice, even names Anthony Fauci at one point, which just makes me ask, is this anti-vax propaganda? Because that's what the issue was during the pandemic. People, particularly conservatives, were not only tired of being stuck inside with nothing to do, but they also had no interest in getting the vaccines or wearing the masks necessary to protect themselves and others. Only someone right-leaning would ever call masks polarizing because it only polarized people with empathy from people without it.
This is corporate design. It's not creative expression. URW type foundry typefaces. Corporate S font. Oh, the corporate S font is so nice in my Tony Hawk skateboarding punk rock game.
I mean, yeah. I don't think it's a bold claim to say that no one particularly likes these kinds of fonts or stylizations, whether it's a product or a piece of art. I don't know if it matters to me as much as it does to SmallDude here, but it's important nonetheless.
It's easier for them to just force you to think something's good, rather than take a chance on something that you might not be willing to pay for. Why take a creative risk when you can just force people to believe that everything you do is good?
I imagine this is the reason why SmallDude believes that video game remakes shouldn't exist. New ideas are risky, but they're also exciting, and younger people are growing more and more interested in art that takes creative risks. I do wonder what he is referring to with Activision's propaganda, though. If the main idea is to strip away creativity, then what is there to be brainwashed into believing?
Berkshire Hathaway, the Vanguard Group, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, State Street Corporation, Capital Research and Management Company, Norges Bank, I think the National Bank, Kite Lake Capital Management.
It shouldn't be surprising that a video game company worth billions of dollars has shareholders with greater concern for profit than art. Most companies in the entertainment industry have only lasted as long as they have because that decision, that change, was eventually made. Not telling you that you should love these rich CEOs, but big companies do tend to be owned by even bigger companies. And I probably sound like a broken record saying this, but if you're only interested in gaming as an art form, then you probably need to avoid 99% of major gaming releases. EA, Activision, Ubisoft, Riot, Konami, even other more beloved companies like Nintendo, Capcom, Naughty Dog, and Rockstar are guilty of selling products instead of selling art. Support the developers who make what you want to see.
If consumers had any values, they wouldn't stand for such corporate influence in the products that they love. But consumers don't care. They just consume. But I was just watching you play Tony Hawk's on the PS2, and there was a McDonald's in the background. Well, okay, so... see, I stumped you. Well, at least that was an original game. It's not a remake that put a McDonald's in where there wasn't one before. I so got you. You're speechless. I'm not speechless. I'm talking right now. You have no response. Well, I'm formulating a response. I'm in the process of formulating it.
I think most people can agree that product placement doesn't improve the quality of a game. Sure, a legitimate brand used appropriately in a game can contribute to a more immersive experience, but more brands don't equate to more fun. However, you do know how advertisements work, right? Just because Wolverine and Darth Maul were in the original Pro Skater 3 doesn't necessarily mean that Marvel and Star Wars want those characters in the new one. Companies pay to have their products promoted, or get paid to have them licensed, and they may say no to either. That's not to say that Iron Galaxy didn't fail to try and put these characters back in the game, but my point is, we don't know what happened. Additionally, you don't have to be stun-locked by your own position on product placement, small dude. You can still like something despite the fact that it features real-world brands. Do you think people liked E.T. any less because it featured Reese's Pieces? Or Uncharted 3 because it featured Subway? No. The artistic expression of the respective film and game stood on their own, and that's why people liked them.
The original joke was that it's a policeman and he's a dick. Haha, fuck the cops because cops stop skaters from skateboarding. But now it's just Jack Black in a costume. What if I told you that Vanguard, who owns 8% of Activision, is the largest shareholder in AMC theaters? What kind of movies do they show in AMC theaters? Oh yeah, Jack Black movies!
Although Yum Brands owns every Taco Bell, not every movie theater is owned by AMC. So while eating at Taco Bell will always financially compensate Yum Brands, watching a Jack Black movie doesn't always compensate AMC. What if I watch Nacho Libre on Netflix? Or Gulliver's Travels on DVD? Or what if I just straight up pirate Kung Fu Panda? I think you're trying to over-explain why Jack Black was in the game, when the answer is probably just because he's a celebrity who very vocally loves video games.
Because their company doesn't actually need to make money. They get paid through private equity.
We actually just went through a transaction as well. So we have a large investment from a private equity firm.
Honestly, I would love to see a whole video about this topic. Studios and companies that fail miserably yet are still able to putter along like nothing happened. The more common occurrence nowadays seems to be the opposite, where a game fails but the employees take the fall instead of the executives who told them to make it. But yeah, a lot of shadiness in the modern gaming business that I'd like to know more about.
A potentially major omission from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 had fans worried. Would Activision really leave one of the series' most beloved skaters behind? Nope.
Yes, you would do that, because you literally were going to do that. Ultimately, they just resort to straight up false advertising by saying, who says there's no career mode? You said there's no career mode, because there isn't one.
Both of these are perfectly valid criticisms of the game, since one is an omission that they then unomitted, and the other is blatant false advertising. And the responses are band-aids on a bullet wound.
We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year. If you don't achieve these levels, you're going to be impacted.
That's an investment criteria for you.
This is incredibly disgusting to hear someone in charge of a multi-billion-dollar company, responsible for funding a large portion of video game companies, talking about women and other minorities in gaming like investments in a stock. This is why I think it's so important for all of us, not just as consumers, but as people, to recognize the strengths in one another so that, unlike the ruling class, we can look past their alarming concern with demographics and simply celebrate our differences like brothers and sisters. Before we continue though, I'd like to ask a very important question. Who is Small Dude? Well, prior to this video we're watching, he seems to have been making Family Guy edits exclusively. Nothing wrong with that, but an interesting wrinkle in the Small Dude lore. His most popular of these videos is titled Peter Griffin Says the N-word. Huh. Kind of an off-color video to have posted in 2021. I guess one thing I do appreciate is how he used the same eclectic style of editing in those videos to make the one we're watching right now. Anyway, back to what I was saying earlier about diversity, let's see what Small Dude has to say about diversity in the context of this Tony Hawk remake.
There's very little information about what they actually do as a company, but there are pages and pages of long, detailed profiles on the sexual identity and ethnic background of their employees. Compare that to their one single web page about game development. And not only is this section extremely vague about what their actual role is with these games.
Out of curiosity, I took a look at Iron Galaxy's website, and it is true that there are profiles for just about every developer that works there, which, honestly, I think is pretty cool. Most gamers, including myself, are guilty of simply viewing the game studio as solely responsible for the works of art that they produce, when in reality tens or even hundreds of people put years of their lives into what would become the final product. So having an easy means of viewing each designer and producer alongside their credits is very beneficial. What isn't true is what he said about the pages dedicated to the games they've worked on. Each game they have listed has a clickable link that redirects you to a page, including what release of the game they worked on, which parts they contributed to during the development, and so on. I'm not sure why he lied and failed to mention this.
It also purposefully excludes any information about their PC ports for The Last of Us and Arkham Knight.
Even checking their site months after this video was posted, they still have not included these PC ports he mentioned. As I began to imagine why they might do this though, I realized their site also doesn't show THPS 3+4, which was a game that they developed independently, if you ignore the engine made by Vicarious Visions and the assets made by Neversoft. They have a news page that seems to be semi-regularly updated, but for some reason their game releases stop at around 2022. I know I just said this, but why fail to mention this?
Today, I'm going to tell you why this game is propaganda. How does this game force you to change your behavior as a consumer? Why did they remove all of that content from the game, and what did they replace it with?
Not to play devil's advocate here, but isn't this video itself already propagandizing with selective use of fact? I caught you lying about something as benign as development information about Spyro Reignited. As you claim in your video later, propaganda is most effective when fact and fiction are indistinguishable from one another, and I suspect that you're beginning to do that here. And again, like the implications with the disabled skater from earlier, I don't like the implications being made here with the pride flag. We live in a heteronormative society, and at the time of recording, it's currently Pride Month. And still, we have people that vehemently reject or even fail to understand its purpose. Inclusivity of queer people does not exclude cis-het people, and I hate that that's the undertone here.
These skaters are all included based on merit, by the way. Oh, Quagmire, wait until you see this! Oh my god! He's a skateboarder with no legs!
Earlier in the video, you had stated that over 80% of skaters are male, which I didn't believe was false, but I did wonder how recent your findings were. I'm assuming you got them from this page by Public Skate Park Guide. While one stat does indeed find that 80% of skaters are male, they specify that these are core skaters. They go on to define core skaters as skaters who skate at least once a week per year on average, and by extension, casual skaters fit many other definitions like longboarders and other subgroups. The reason I bring this up is because with the way you gave that stat, you implied that only core skaters care about skating video games. However, that is way too broad of an assumption to make. Casual skaters can still be interested in extreme skating, and people uninterested in skating can be interested too because that's the beauty of sports and video games. You don't have to be as good as Tom Brady to play Madden, and you don't have to compete against LeBron James in order to watch basketball. Like earlier, you're trying to draw correlations where there aren't any. You also spend a few minutes joking about the new skaters added into this remake. Keep in mind, 3+4 released 24 years after the original, so to include the exact same roster without any new additions would only invalidate its status as a remake further. I have to believe we would agree on that. Comparing this to movies for a second, imagine if every Spider-Man movie cast Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker. For many people, that'd be an obvious pick, but that's not all. Imagine they continue to cast Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, Rosemary Harris as Aunt May, J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, and so on. Eventually, you'd either run out of stories to tell with these actors, the actors themselves would lose interest, or they'd pass away. At some point, people have to retire and new people have to replace them. Maybe not in Family Guy's case, but if they don't, you run the risk of losing what made it so special to begin with. Then, on top of all of this, you're assuming these new skaters are only being included based on identity and not on their proven ability. Now, I understand why you bring up the ethnic and sexual identities of these skaters to a fault. We know that later in the video, you showed the clip of the BlackRock CEO being completely tone deaf in his interview, basically likening all these different minorities to numbers on a graph, which I can't stress how fucked up that is. However, I can't help but feel that withholding this information until over an hour later into the video gives the impression that you, small dude, are also failing to see these people as anything less than their identities. There's another clip he shows a little later,
highlighting women and me as like a queer skater I think is really important, really important, really important, really important, really important, really important.
Really important for who?
That further accentuates my feelings on this. I'll admit that I don't know who any of these new faces are, so there is a chance that some of them are indeed only being included to add more points of diversity to their game, but at the same time, I also hardly know any of the old faces because I didn't know them before I played these games. It may be wrong of me to assume, so for a moment I'm going to take a page out of your book, but I think you're making these assumptions about their inclusion because you don't recognize them either. And that would be the most damning thing of all from these clips because that only further insinuates your prejudice towards these groups of people.
Because you alluded to some sort of dissonance with the inclusion of transsexuals in this fun video game. Is it fun to have transgenders in this game?
I think it was at this moment in the video that I reached a bit of a turning point. Never have I ever heard of an ally referring to trans people or people who are trans as transgenders, and certainly not transsexuals. Just before this, you claimed that transgenders are people, which is still a phrase I've never heard among allies. I've frequently heard trans women are women, or trans men are men, or most commonly, trans rights are human rights. I don't think any of these would fit into the context of the video segment here, but the inclusions of the aforementioned phrases you did use don't sit right with me.
If you want to be represented in mainstream media, make your own thing.
Game development is still a job at the end of the day, and these people still have bosses that have expectations and deadlines for their employees. Your boss may allow you to make a game about your experiences as a queer person, or about anything you want for that matter, but your boss may ask you to make a remake of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 as well. In other words, even as artists, they may not have been given a choice as to what kind of projects they can create. And if you were to counter that with, well, then maybe they should work for a different boss. Given the state of the entertainment industry and the economy as a whole, they probably feel fortunate enough to even have a job to begin with. Not to mention, being gay or trans does not always have to be an explicit element of the game's identity or story. As you bring up later on,
you know the original Tony Hawk's games already had a gay woman. Rodney Mullen? No, Alyssa Steamer. Who the hell is that? It's a queer woman who's been in the game since the first one. How come I didn't know about this? This is really important. You didn't know about it because it wasn't advertised.
Despite being a queer skater, it doesn't change what the game is about or what her role in the game is. Would you expect Alyssa Steamer to be in a completely separate game with only queer skaters? Characters and designers can just be gay or trans without it factoring into their creative expression.
All this says is that identity is more important than skill or talent.
Okay, now you're starting to embarrass yourself. You did all this research on the game's development, the backgrounds of the game designers, the owners and shareholders of Activision and Iron Galaxy, but you couldn't be fucked to even confirm the talents of the skaters included? Chloe Cavell is the youngest X Games participant to win a gold medal. Zion Wright qualified for the 2020 Olympics in skateboarding. Yuto Horigome won 2 gold medals in the Olympics for skateboarding. Leticia Buffoni is a 6-time X Games gold medalist. And Leo Baker, the queer skater you seem to be obsessed with, won 3 medals at the X Games despite struggling to keep sponsors at the time. This really only confirms my suspicions from earlier that you just don't know who they are, and assume everyone else doesn't, and similarly won't do a modicum of research to figure out who they are.
Do you think it's just a coincidence that this many people involved with the game are gay, trans, or an ethnic minority?
Even though we already know why these teams are structured how they are, you still sound really shitty for putting it like this. Historically, when groups of people are oppressed and ostracized by society, they form their own societies. That's why you have Chinatowns and Little Mexicos and the LGBTQ community in general, and so many other communities centered around minorities. For people who recognize these patterns, all this does is make you sound like a bigoted conspiratorial nutcase. And for people who are bigoted conspiratorial nutcases, all this does is help to reaffirm their uneducated preconceptions.
Remember when this awesome game came out?
Weren't you complaining earlier about their exclusion of games like The Last of Us and Arkham Knight, games whose ports were poorly received? Much like Fallout 76? Do you want them to be truthful about their failures or not?
We asked ourselves, what improvements would you like to see in the games industry?
Not just in games, but everywhere. I'm excited to see more acceptance of the full rainbow of genders and sexualities.
I'm super happy to see more representation these days.
Remember Gamergate? Remember how minorities in the gaming space, particularly women, were heavily criticized for simply being present and visible, either as gamers or makers of games? Remember how in the years following there was a societal pushback to rampant homophobia and a greater need for political correctness, minimizing the use of offensive terms and stereotypes? Remember how legal protections against such discrimination were threatened in all 3 branches of the US federal government? I hope so, because those things that were happening over a decade ago are still happening now, which is probably why they'd like to see those things improved, not just in their place of employment, but all facets of their lives.
If you'd like to help me keep the spirit of the old internet alive, then joining the Small Dude's Patreon is the way to go.
By that, do you mean the spirit of hatred and exclusivity, or the spirit of societal regression? They're very close to each other, so it's hard to tell which one you're referring to.
This video features professional camera equipment, lighting fixtures, and a professional audio edit.
Oh, and hi. Welcome to the Chef's Kiss. Today we will be cooking some pasta carbonara.
This is the kind of thing I would have liked to see more of in this video. To me, this seems much more important than the stuff from earlier about the identities of the developers and skaters. It also ties back into what was pointed out earlier with the private investors and the apparently incompetent game director, in that as long as the company meets a certain identity quota, they'll continue to be funded overhead.
Instead of impressing the girls, you impress the skaters. So if you do some tricks over here, look who's watching. Look, it's the skateboarder with no legs. Oh my God, he's back.
If you're that upset with the removal of conventionally attractive women from a video game, you can just watch porn. No one will think less of you. Well, I'll think less of you just for entirely different reasons unrelated to the porn thing.
The answer to everything is always money. Oh, I knew you were gonna say that. Businesses with a market value of $74 billion don't get there through kindness and love. You get there by selling as many products to as many people as possible.
This should have been the through line of the entire video, but it wasn't. I think I've made it clear that using the likenesses and identities of these minorities to sell their companies to investors truly is the bane of society's existence. But the fact that it took 70 minutes to reach these conclusions after 69 minutes of questioning how and why people of color and queer people are so deeply tied to this game's development completely undoes any positive statement that could have been made, in my opinion. Despite everything we've looked at so far, I was still willing to give Small Dude the benefit of the doubt. Yes, he made a lot of questionable remarks about minorities, but at the very least, they were all centered around the idea that remakes aren't always a good idea, and billionaires meddling with the work of artists is an even worse idea. Right? Right?
Peter, with all due respect, you sound like a totally insane retard right now.
After picking on disabled skater Felipe Nunez 3 separate times throughout this video, now you're just blatantly being ableist. No sarcasm, no point to be made, just straight up saying the R slur.
No recognition of our community and representation in the games that get funded.
Very interesting choice here to use this accent. It would be excusable, given the fact that a few seconds earlier he also used a weird voice to quote some of the developers, if it wasn't for what comes up a minute later.
Yeah, to wrap it up, I was going to say, Iron Galaxy does a really good job of giving people a chance, so apply with this if you don't have experience.
Wow. Fuck you, dude. You literally included, in your own video, footage of one of the project managers being interviewed, speaking, using her own voice, and yet you, being the piece of shit that you are, still consciously decide to use a stereotypical black guy voice, again, when quoting a queer black woman. You fucking suck. Now, this would have been where I ended the video, but things get worse. Back in December, about 5 months after the Tony Hawk video went up, he released another video titled, "Please have a look at my business card." Being neither a Family Guy edit, nor a follow-up to the video we just watched, I checked it out and, well, just watch for yourself.
I do not know what you are saying.
The unicorn Negro has the body of a black man and the mind of a white man. Good luck.
No. Just no. Being completely blown away by this video, I noticed in the description that there was a link to the full movie. I don't know what the fuck kind of movie you would even begin to categorize this as, but upon clicking the link, my eyes were blinded by the website that is MDE TV. Firstly, this is an absolutely abhorrent website design. I don't know if it's supposed to be ironically bad or what, but it physically hurts to glance at a single pixel on this page. The next thing I noticed was the name, $1 Million Extreme. Obviously, I'd only seen things like this in my nightmares, so I looked up what MDE actually was and realized the gravity of Small Dude's arguments. MDE was founded by Sam Hyde, who donated money to a neo-Nazi back in 2017, Nick Rochefort, who seems to be obsessed with podcasts, and Charles Carroll, who tweeted the word rape 55 separate times in 2025 alone. Which all of this would then explain the most recent community post on Small Dude's channel, as well as this screenshot from the respective video. From the first minute of Small Dude's Tony Hawk video, I could tell that something was awry. Many of the talking points he made were questionable at best and hateful at worst, But even what seemed to be true, I began to question more and more as the video continued. I now realize that this was his intention all along. In criticism of Sam Hyde, David Lawrence wrote, he uses a veneer of satire to create uncertainty around his actual beliefs, enabling recourse to the excuse it's just a joke. This is exactly how thesmalldude frames so many of his discussions around queerness, people of color, disabilities, and women in his video. He uses the thesmalldude caricature as a vehicle for comedy by making statements and assumptions supporting minorities, then takes that as an opportunity to call such actions solicited and pandering. He acknowledges the practices of studio executives to capitalize on the increase of LGBTQ people, but criticizes said people for being involved to begin with. He claims to be accepting of differences, but uses slurs and outdated phrases when referring to these differences.
But you can be critical and still enjoy things.
This was the sentiment I was hoping to walk away from this video with. That despite the discrepancy between our two perspectives, I could still find value and enjoyment from this video. But after everything that thesmalldude has alluded to, associated himself with, and done, I simply can't do that. The lines have long been blurred with what he believes and what he doesn't, and thesmalldude is exactly the kind of propaganda that needs to be wiped from the earth. Thanks for watching.